All right, guys, what is up? Welcome back to Truth and Transparency. This is episode 7. Episode 7. All right, so I'm going to take us back here. Now, straight from the Matt Dalton book. Matt Dalton, again, is a lawyer. He was on the Scott Peterson case, and he was actually as Scott Peterson's like PI, basically, but he was a prosecutor. So, when again, Scott Peterson was arrested. He immediately came on, and so he got to work. He was basically living in Modesto, in some little office spot. He was sleeping on the floor. He made a tent. It's crazy. Anyways, I'm going to read this little clip here. It's going to go into some research that I've done. Here we go. This is document 4560. The newly acquired discovery contains some startling information that had never been reported publicly. One of the first items to grab my attention was a police report dated December 30th, 2002. In the report, Officer Tyler of the Modesto Police wrote, "On 12/28/2002, I received information from a sexual assault counselor and stated that approximately 2 weeks ago, she helped a confidential victim of sexual assault. The counselor stated that during the interview of the victim stated that she was lured into a brown van, a Chevy or a Ford, by her ex-girlfriend. While in the van, 2 men and 2 women raped the victim and a satanic ritual was conducted. The victim told the counselor that the group frequents area parks and was currently living at Woodward Reserve. The counselor stated the victim said that during the ritual, the group mentioned a Christmas Day death and that she would read about it in the paper. After hearing about Laci's disappearance," so that's what the report said. Okay. Now, Matt says that after hearing about Laci's disappearance, the counselor was concerned enough to inform Officer Tyler, who was also her brother-in-law. Such reports to counselors protect the victims' identities, so we were unable to locate the woman who made the report. But the victim had told the counselor the name of one of those involved. And the officer located 4 people in a brown van living in the Woodward Reserve. And that's about 20 miles from where Modesto is. Okay. The group turned out to be a family. Now, what Matt did in his book is when you see a dash that follows the first appearance of a name, that name has been changed to protect the identity of the individual. So he calls these people Antonio and Peggy W. Live there with their adult son and daughter, Tom and Karen. Those aren't the real names, but those are the people. He's just giving them fake names. Tom had been charged and convicted of cruelty to animals a few years before this. So what does Lana do? Lana looks up that. Well, who's been, arrested or for cruelty to animals. So I can come with like a little bit of a list of who these people could possibly be. Then they were from the airport district of Modesto. Now, in order to understand the Scott Peterson case, you have to understand the area that they lived in. Everybody thought that this area was just, oh, it's so great. Look at this. They just built an indoor pool, not indoor, an in-ground pool. They had the hot tub. They were just, this is in such a beautiful home and such a great place. All of that could not be further from the truth. Okay. Their home literally butted up to the ghetto. Their street was 1 block away, depending on which way you traveled, to the ghetto. There's just no other way around it. It's just what it is. So, and that would be known as the airport district of Modesto. Now, this family, they were living at a different campsite. They would drive around, but the airport district refers to a low-income neighborhood near the Modesto airport that borders the Petersons' neighborhood. When this family was interviewed by police, they were not arrested. They did admit to the officer that they had been near Laci's neighborhood around Christmas and had noticed that the Yosemite Boulevard was blocked off with police vehicles. They said the reason for the visit was to get parts for their brown van. Now, the story struck Matt very odd and suspicious because they claimed that they drove 25 miles, which is 40 minutes, from where they were camping, past more than a dozen auto parts stores to get parts for their van. This group had been accused of abducting a woman, and according to the victim, they promised that they would be back to do it again around Christmas time. But this time, it was not going to be a rape, but a murder. Still, no arrests were made. The police apparently did not feel it was worthy or worth pursuing, and ultimately, I heard that the rape counselor was fired for disclosing the information. Now, on the 23rd, so the night before the of Laci being abducted, a separate police report revealed that on the night of December 23rd, a neighbor of Laci and Scott's, and they're just calling him Simon, was sitting in his car in front of his house listening to a police scanner. I guess that's what people do. He observed what he thought was a suspicious-looking brown van followed by two cars. Simon followed the van down Encina Avenue in the direction of the Peterson house. Two people got out of the van and approached his car. He accelerated around them, sped off. This occurred 2 short blocks from Laci's house the night of December 23rd. The first 2 times Simon called to report this to the police, he was ignored. One of the police dispatch logs reflects that he was angry about the lack of response. Finally, police detectives Trogan and Ray Bennett met with Simon at the Modesto Police Department on January 23rd, 2003, and took the following statement. He says, Simon stated that on 12/23 at approximately 9:30, he was sitting in his car in front of his residence. He said he was sitting in his car listening to the scanner and watching for burglars. Simon stated as he was sitting in his car, he noticed a 1985 to a 1995 brown cargo 5-window van with tinted windows. Now, I would think that this would be extraordinary, like who just sits looking for burglars. They actually did in that area. They were actually some neighborhood watch, all these people on that street, and in that area. And at first it would seem so outrageous, but it's actually not, because during Christmas time, days leading up to Christmas, it's notorious for people leaving to go out of town. And then it's notorious in Modesto. You need to look this stuff up. All they have is literally people burglarizing, stealing shit to go then sell it to go use it on drugs. And they were coming over from the airport district, which is literally right there. So it's after you do some research and you actually see the paper and you see what people are being arrested for in the area, it's not far-fetched that, hey, I'm going to be on the lookout for burglars. So it's at first when I was reading this, I was like, what the fuck, Simon, you have no life, or Simon, you're weird, but he's not. Legit. I just wouldn't live in the area. I'd move. But anyways, he said this van also described as an extra heavy van, like a 3/4 ton. Simon said the van, this is all written in a police report. This is verbatim, the police report. Simon stated that the van drove by his residence and it was being followed by a white 4-door car. So that's like a sedan, which looked like a Honda, but it was not a Honda. So it could be like a Kia. Simon stated that the van and white car drove by his residence 2 other times. So he became suspicious and decided to follow them. Simon said that the vehicles drove down to the end of his street and then turned left heading westbound on Siena, in Siena, and then stated that he drove down to the street, decided to turn around on Roble, which is one street before in Siena. And then Simon told me that when he turned westbound on Roble, he saw that the van was now stopped on Roble facing eastbound. Simon said as he got closer to the van, a white male adult, clean cut, 6 foot, 200 to 230 pounds, 35 to 40 years old, short to medium length, dark brown or black hair receding in the front, wearing a tan hunting jacket and jeans, got out of the driver's seat and attempted to stop him. Simon stated that this male was not wearing any kind of identification as a police officer, so he decided to drive around the subject. Simon told me he drove by the van. He noticed that 2 other people near the back doors of the van. Simon said he also saw the white Honda-looking car stop at the stop sign on Caviana and Roble facing southbound. He stated that there was another car, which reminded him of a Lexus, stopped behind that white car, the Honda-looking car. Simon stated one of the subjects from the van flagged the other cars over, at which time both white cars turned eastbound on Roble in front of him. So basically, the moral of the story is that he believed that the van is working in concert with the two sedans. Okay, great. In this statement, Matt says Simon described for police a vehicle that could have been the same brown van that had been involved in the reported satanic rape and abduction that took place 2 weeks before Laci disappeared. And now it appears it may have just been 2 blocks away from where Laci would disappear the following day. Police logs indicated that at about 11:30 a.m. on December 24th, the morning that Laci was last seen, neighbor Diane Jackson saw a house being burglarized across the street from the Petersons. Jackson described watching the burglars load a safe into the back of a brown van. She later made a tentative identification of the brown van. This group at the Woodward Reserve was driving, saying that the from behind it could be the same van I saw across from the Petersons' home that morning on the 24th. So Matt Dalton calls up Mark Garagos, and they're both extremely excited because they're like, let me find this van. Now remember, when Matt Dalton would be doing this, it's in May, after Scott Peterson had been arrested. So everything he's doing and following up with is in May of 2003. Okay. So May of 2003, he tells Mark, hey, I got this lead. From what Diane Jackson said, then I read this report from what Tyler had written up, and we need to look for this brown van. We need to find this brown van. So he also said that, and we have witnesses who independently reported seeing a similar brown van in the neighborhood the night of the 23rd, and now we have the morning of the 24th. So those are two independent sources, and it appears that they may have lied to police about their reasons for being there. According to Matt Dalton, it's like, why would you drive all the way 25 miles to get a part for your van? So there were no other reports about the people in the brown van staying at the reserve. The paragraph-long police report taken by the counselor's brother-in-law was all the information we had on the group. Matt Dalton said, I needed to learn more about them, about the earlier abduction, about the burglary across the street from the Petersons' home on that morning that Laci disappeared. So first and foremost, I needed to find Antonio and Peggy, their adult children, Tom and Karen, and their brown van. So the park ranger at the Woodward Reserve recalled having seen them hanging around the campsite with another group, camping next to each other. The two groups had gotten into an argument around Christmas time and left the park at the same time he had. The rape victim reported that one of her attackers mentioned a Christmas Day death. Somebody in this group may have known something about it, but incredibly, there was no information in the documents I had before me indicating the police had ever followed up on them. The police report I reviewed was marked NFA, which means no further action. Now, next, Matt goes to fill in the Petersons about what he's doing and what he's working on because he talked to Scott like every day. So after he leaves Scott, he says that there were witnesses in the neighborhood who called the police describing a brown van in Laci's neighborhood the night of the 23rd and the morning of the 24th. The witnesses appeared to be describing the same brown van, is what he told Peterson. In addition, I told them that according to the police report, the group admitted that they were in the area of Laci's neighborhood around Christmas time. However, they claimed that they were getting parts for their van 25 miles from their campsite. From what I had seen, the police did not seem to put any pressure on them with their questioning. This is what he's telling Scott Peterson while he's talking to him in jail. In one of the search warrant affidavits prepared by the police, they reported, quote unquote, 3 witnesses who saw a brown van in the neighborhood around the time of Laci's disappearance. I had found 2 of those witnesses in the discovery and also told the Petersons about them. Now, from the Modesto police report, Matt obtained the license plate number of the brown van driven by the family who had been camping at the Woodward Reserve. It was registered to the owner of an auto body shop in Ceres, California, which is right next to Modesto. It's a small city just south of Modesto off of Highway 99. And now I want you guys to remember an auto body shop owner. Just keep that in your back pocket. It's going to come up later. And what I've uncovered. As soon as I said goodbye to the Petersons, I drove there to the body shop. The shop owner told me he had sold the 1987 van to a Peggy, the same name that was contained in Officer Tyler's report about the abduction rape. She had given him cash down, but after the van was driven off, he never received another payment or saw Peggy or her family again. However, the shop owner knew the whole bunch since at one time they had lived just across the street. I heard they ran out on their rent payment too. Okay. He said they lived right over there. He pointed to a one-story apartment unit across the dirt road from where we were standing at the auto body shop. They were a dangerous group, this guy recalled. You can talk to this guy if you want to know more about them. And he handed Matt a piece of paper on which he had written a telephone number, and he's calling him Billy. Like, here, the guy that owns the body shop, he doesn't give him a name, but he's like, here you go. Here's a number, and his name's Billy. And he used to be married to the daughter. So he'd be Karen's ex-husband. He can tell you all about that bunch. He ran with them for a while until he got fed up with them. The shop owner said that Billy, Karen's ex-husband, was a good man who did not belong with that group. For one thing, he's honest, he said. And then Matt's like, well, where does Billy live? He said, I'm not too sure where he's staying anymore, but he still might be out by the airport district, okay? Now, I thanked him, and then he's like, all right, I gotta just continue on my hunt, right? Finally, before he left, he goes over to this shady-looking character, a couple of them, Matt does, and he's like asking questions about where he can find this fucking family, right? And finally, one of them said that they had left around Christmas time, so that they were around that area around Christmas time, and that nobody has seen them since around Christmas time. Okay. He wouldn't give me his name. The guy that gave him that information, he was like a shady looking guy. He's just like, they haven't been here since around Christmas time. So I was able to locate Karen's ex-husband, Billy, who lived in the airport district of Modesto. So now Matt goes back over to the airport district, which is probably like, I don't know, it's a good 10 to 12 street names. And then you can really kind of hone in on 4 or 5. And like they're in like this circular area, but a lot of the roads are running parallel to each other. And then like an outer street that kind of goes around it. Anyways, literally butts up right up to where Laci Peterson and Scott Peterson lived. When he meets up with Billy, again, that's not his real name, but he was very cooperative, possibly because of his low opinion of his former in-laws. He told me that the family members were drug users, had guns, and moved from one campsite to another in their brown van. Since I was getting nowhere trying to find them, I decided that I might have better luck trying to find this motherfucking van. I bought the title to it for $200 from the shop owner and hired 3 companies to try to repossess it. Okay? They were to be paid only upon making a recovery. We searched every campsite from Woodward Reserve to Sacramento looking for this group in the brown van. Mark Garagos then decides, fuck this, we're just going to hold a press conference. Mark Garagos holds a press conference and asks the public's help in trying to locate the woman who had reportedly been abducted and raped by the satanic group. What I had hoped would be a private investigation suddenly turned into a contest between the police and us to see who could find the van first. Well, the police won. Okay? Why were the police all so, all of a sudden just so interested in recovering this brown van? One afternoon, soon thereafter, Mark Garagos called me and announced, hey, they found your van. I was frustrated, he says, and didn't do a very good job of hiding that. The police wanted Scott Peterson, period. At this point, I was convinced of it. I had little confidence that they would explore any evidence in that van that might actually point toward a different theory of the crime. So remember, this is happening, May, June. After he's arrested, they're trying to find this van. Now, all of a sudden, the police found it. Okay. Here we go. When the police finally notified, because he bought the title, so it's his motherfucking van. He bought the title. So who owns that van? Well, Matt Dalton owns that van. When the police finally notified me that I could come claim the van, investigator Bill Pavlovac and I went to pick it up at the Modesto Police Department. Inside, there was gray duct tape, black electrical tape, which to me is even more is bigger than the gray duct tape, and we're going to talk about it when we talk about Connor's body. Red and black candles, and more than 10 spots that look like bloodstains. The apparent bloodstains had been circled with blue ink. I asked the police if they had tested them, and they said no. At trial, it was learned that the Modesto Police Department did in fact test the blood found in the brown van. It was determined by the police that none of the stains were human blood. The defense never conducted its own testing. Now, all of these items could have been relevant to the investigation, but the police didn't seem interested. And we lacked the resources to do anything more, since that would have required a team of equipped crime scene investigators. Also, in that van were 8 car batteries. 8 car batteries. So if you were joining us before this episode 7 kicked off, I was telling you guys how I was looking up what could you use 8 car batteries for? What could you use them for? They could be used for torture. They could also be used, believe it or not, to make meth and to help out in making fentanyl. Anyways, 8 car batteries. Pavlik asked the police if they had written stolen property reports regarding the batteries and whether they were conducting an investigation into the group that reportedly committed the abduction and rape just before Laci disappeared. And as usual, the answer was no. Now, why is Lana talking to us about any of this? Because I have to give you the backstory to understand where we're going to go right now, which is, ready? The watch. During the time that I was trying to locate that W family, Karen, Tom, and the parents in that van, I was also following up on the intriguing item in the discovery about the gold Croton watch that had been pawned on December 31st. The police had gone through all of Laci's clothing and jewelry to determine that she was wearing when she disappeared. They were unable to find that gold watch, and according to Scott Peterson, she had put it on that morning. So the police found Laci's watch case, which was open and emptied on her dresser. Okay. So we got information from a copy of the pawn ticket in the discovery. So when they got the discovery, there was no police report with the pawn ticket. It was just this pawn ticket. Convinced that we might have located Laci's missing watch, Matt was like, I'm going to try to make numerous attempts at getting in touch with this pawn shop dude that runs it. The pawn shop, which was 10 minutes from Laci's house, okay, it smelled like old furniture, consisting of 2 adjoining rooms, wall-to-wall merchandise. It had the usual array of jewelry and watches. The pawnbroker wouldn't even come out of the back to talk to me. He wrote a note telling him that he'd paid $300. So this is in June. Here's $300. I want to buy that watch. Well, based off the ticket, it was $25. So here, you're going to make $275. He went and responded to the offer. Okay. Remember, Laci inherited that watch from her grandma. Now, as Matt studied the pawn slip, he realized that the woman who pawned the watch had an almost identical last name to the family connected to the brown van staying at the Woodward Reserve. We now know that last name is Renfro, right? Whether people want to say it's Diane, Diana, Deanna, Renfro. And the only thing that he noticed that was different was that one of them ended in a W and the other one ended in an E. So now basically what Matt gave me in this book is that, okay, the pawn slip, okay, the pawn slip, the last name, it's spelled differently, okay, by one letter off, but it's the same. Renfro, fucking Renfro, whether you want to spell it with an E or W, okay, Renfro. I followed up that lead as well as I could, but was unable to locate the woman who had pawned the watch or to determine if she had any relationship to the people in the van. So at the time that this is happening, Matt is unable to find the person that pawned this watch. And the only ticket he originally had was that it was pawned on the 31st. Okay. Because as we now know, it was pawned then a second time. He writes in this book in 2005. So this should just tell you that none of this came out in trial because he's writing this in this book. He says, I don't know if the police have ever tried to locate her. With their resources, she could have easily been located and questioned. He knows all this because he's a prosecutor. Now listen to this. He says, just 6 months earlier, as a deputy district attorney, I could have quickly and easily pursued these seemingly incriminating circumstances, which were things like a gold watch that we believe could have belonged to Laci had been pawned within a week following her disappearance. The last name signed by the person pawning the watch was almost the same as the people in the brown van staying at the Woodward Reserve. And then a witness described seeing a brown van in Laci's neighborhood the night before, and then the next day, a brown van with the whole burglary. Okay, so you have all these things that are like seemingly like, come on, we have to talk to these people, the brown van people, right? And he's letting us know in his book that the prosecution and the police have all the resources. They're supposed to be doing this. They're supposed to be running down these leads. They're supposed to be determining what the fuck's going on and what this all means, right? All this shakedown. Now, the defense had limited funds, no subpoena power for investigations, no way to offer benefits or immunity for cooperating witnesses, no unlimited access to documents, and very little, if any, cooperation from public agencies and the prosecution witnesses and the prosecution period. So, now with all of that said, when the Innocence Project went ahead and asked for, all these items to be produced in discovery, I'm going to read you this little section. Okay. Hang tight though. Matt went back over and talked to Billy. Here we go. And when he went back over to talk to Billy, he was driving back through the roads of the airport Modesto area, and he noticed that there was cop vehicles and an undercover car at and around Billy's where Billy lived. And so he waited for the the vehicles to leave, but as Matt sees coming out of the house after talking with Billy, it's fucking Al Brucheni and Brogan. Okay. And he's like, what did those guys want from you? They wanted to know what you guys were doing here. Dude, they were following. Okay, or you have a rat that's telling the police what the fuck's going on. They were either following Scott Peterson's Matt Dalton serving as like a PI, or somebody that's a CI was literally just feeding the cops all the information that's going on in the airport district. You can pick and choose what you want. It's either one or the other. But Billy said, well, they want to know what I was talking to you about the other day when you came here. Okay. So again, this would have had to have been after the arrest of Scott Peterson. So this is not during the hunt to find Laci and Connor. It was well after that, well after Scott's arrest. So now, I'm going to read you now from this part. All right. Got it. Sorry about that. All right. Here you go. Okay. Okay. In this massive discovery that was unleashed, there's information that comes out about a case that was, it's called The People of California versus Curtis Lynn Shiver. Shivar. Curtis Lynn Shiver. And I'm like, what the heck does this have? It's going to have anything to do with anything, right? Well, I want you to listen. Defendant Curtis Lynn Shiver appeals from the judgment entered following a jury trial that resulted in his conviction for manufacturing methamphetamine, unlawfully possessing hydro acid with the intent to manufacture methamphetamine, possessing methamphetamine, and unlawfully possessing a billy club. Okay. On April 24th, 2003, so before Laci's body was found, or actually right after Laci's body was found, I think it was the 18th of April. So April 24th, 2003, the SCDA office filed an information against the defendant alleging the following, what I just read off to you. So literally a week after they find Laci and Connor. The court sentenced the defendant to a total of 8 years, calculated as follows, and then just list that. Now, we're going to read, this is the prosecution's case, the search, okay? On March 12th, 2003, officers from the Modesto Police Department executed a search warrant on a residence located at 2921 Rimrock Court in Modesto, which was later determined to be owned by the defendant. So Curtis owns this home. The residence contained 4 bedrooms, one of which was a master bedroom that police believe belonged to the defendant. The other 3 bedrooms are believed to belong to Deanna Renfro. Deanna Renfro. And James Brower, Brower. Cindy Hyde. David Macciado, Machado. And if it's the same David, in 2016, he ends up executing a police officer, a sheriff's deputy. Danielle Harbin, Harbin, and Shane Swearingen. It's really Swearingen. Now, Danielle Harbin and Shane Swearingen, they died the night before the search in a car accident following a police chase. According to this, it's saying, this is the factual coming from the courts here, and that the night before the raid on 3/11, that there was a police chase, and this Shane Swearingen, who died the night before the search in a car accident following a police chase. Okay. Now, during the search, now remember, they find this van. Mark, Matt, remember the van? They find has 8 batteries in it, all this shit in there. During this search in March 12th, the police found evidence that the residents of the home were manufacturing methamphetamines. In the northwest bedroom believed to belong to Harbin and Swearinger, the police discovered items used to manufacture methamphetamine, such as matches, scales, coffee filters, bottles, and cookware, a Coleman-type propane fuel with a burner attachment, and various types of chemicals, including Clorox, Red Devil, red phosphorus, hydroacid. Many of the objects discovered in the northwest bedroom were tested by a laboratory, which found the presence of methamphetamine. Okay. In the master bedroom, police found empty boxes of basically, what is it? Sudafed. Okay. Matches, used coffee filters, cookware, black electrical tape, scales, and baggies commonly used to package narcotics. In the closet, the police discovered scales, like all this shit, okay? Billy Club, everything that you can think to make. It's like fucking Breaking Bad, okay? In addition, they discovered a clear bag containing a red phosphorus and a green case, which had it's all this shit. Smoking, it's a pipe, whatever. Now, in the bedroom belonging to Brower and Renfro, police found a marijuana pipe, a stack of sandwich baggies, and a spoon with methamphetamine residue. In the utility room, it just goes on and on and on, okay? Just where all this shit is. In the front yard, officers located a trash can, which contained a plastic bottle with tubing attachment with black electrical tape. Again, I'm all about the black electrical tape. I'll tell you why in a little bit. As well as empty cardboard containers that held, blah, 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 even then more black electrical tape. Now, defendant's arrest. 2 males and 2 females were located at the residence during the execution of the search warrant. Defendant, however, was not present when the search warrant was executed, this Curtis guy. Police located the defendant at his place of work and arrested him. During his arrest, officers conducted a search of the defendant and did not find any methamphetamine. However, in the defendant's wallet, officers discovered a receipt from Walgreens dated the day before, March 11th, 2003, for 2 boxes of 24-count Sudafed cold tablets. They also discovered 2 additional receipts in the defendant's car, one from Save Mart supermarket dated February 26th for distilled water and various grocery items, and then one from Walgreens dated February 16th for 2 boxes of the same shit. Now, they had an expert testify at this trial. And he was testifying that as an investigator with the Modesto Police Department, he testified that in his opinion, based on the items seized during the search, a methamphetamine lab was being operated at that home. In a nutshell, okay? Boom. Now, testimony offered by the defendant's neighbor. So Curtis's neighbor. Curtis's neighbor is none other than Alexander Barba, who is a police officer with the Modesto Police Department. He has been the defendant's neighbor for approximately 7 or 8 years. Barba testified that prior to the day of the search, which was March 12th, was the search, he had seen defendant coming and going from his residence every day. Specifically, he saw defendant leaving in the morning and returning around 5:30. In addition, Barba had observed defendant working inside his garage. Barba had noticed a bad odor coming from the defendant's house after defendant's girlfriend, Doanna. You guys, you can't make this up. Doanna. Doeann. Me and Bella have been laughing about this. I was like, oh, Doanna. Doanna. I thought it was a typo. I'm thinking, oh my God, are they really meaning to say like Deanna? No, guys. Doeann. I don't know if they purposely wanted to fuck and mess all this up, but Doanna. Ever since Doanna moved into the house, and he reported the odor to the Modesto Police Department. Well, here's the problem, though. You're going to hear about what my issue is with that. Now, this police officer testified that he spoke with the defendant many times about the smell coming from the home. Barba acknowledged that he did give the defendant information about how to serve tenants with a 3-day notice and a 30-day notice for eviction. In addition, he testified the defendant appeared to be under the influence of a controlled substance when Barba would speak to him. Now, fingerprint evidence. They bring in this Jean woman. She's a technician at the Stanley's Drug Enforcement Agency. She testified about the fingerprint processing she completed in defendant's home on the day of the search. Jean Philbrook attempted to lift fingerprints from the Coleman fuel cans and some paint thinner, and she was able to create 4 fingerprint cards. As for 3 of the 4 print cards, there was not enough detail to provide a positive identification. The other fingerprint card did not match any of the suspects, including the defendant. So somebody was handling this, and it's not any one of those people, okay, that live there, okay? And the defendant's fingerprints are nowhere to be found on this shit. This is now the defendant's case. The defendant chose to testify and explain that on Christmas Day, now we're going to be backing up Christmas Day, the day after Laci Peterson is taken. The defendant chose to testify and explain that on Christmas Day in 2002, he had broken up with his fiancee, Joanna Balch, Balch. And I said, well, is that a typo? Is it supposed to just be Balch? We'll explain in a minute. Joanna Balch. Cannot make this up. He broke up with his fiancee on Christmas. Fuck, people get rings to get married on Christmas. He broke up with her on Christmas Day. Why? Wouldn't you want to ask, like, what? I mean, how? You usually don't hear that happening, that someone's breaking up with somebody on Christmas. That day, the same day that he breaks up with this broad, Curtis, is the same day that David Macchiato visited him on Christmas and asked if he could stay at the house while he waited to have a surgical procedure before going to prison to serve a term for manufacturing methamphetamine. Defendant agreed, and Machado and his girlfriend, Sydney, who spells her name Sindee, not Sindy, or Cindy, Sydney, Sindee, Sydney. No last name. But the defendant agrees to let this David Machado and his girlfriend, Sydney, move into his house. In January, so 2003, defendant was visited by Harbin, Daniel Harbin, who was looking for defendant's ex-fiance, which would be Joanna Balch. Okay. Harbin left the house and returned then with Swearinger. And they wanted to know, because they were friends with David Machado, whatever. They wanted to know. The defendant testified later that night that David Machado asked if Harbin and her boyfriend, Swearinger, could stay the night. And the defendant agreed, hey, you can stay the night. The next day, Machado and Swearinger approached the defendant and suggested that those two move into the house. The defendant testified that he did not want Swearinger living in his house because he is about 6 foot tall. He's got 21-inch arms on him. He has a solid tattoo from his neck, okay, to his chest, all around his wrist, all the way up his arms. This is what he's testifying to. And he's just like, those two dudes, Machado and Swearinger, they tried to convince the defendant to agree, reminding the defendant that, hey, you are a Christian man, come on. And promise that we're going to pay rent and we only need to stay here for a month. That's it. We just need to be there for a month. The defendant said, fine, so long as it would only be for a month. Okay. After 1 week, defendant began noticing that his tools were missing and believed Swearinger was the one that was taking them. Defendant then spoke with Barba to get information about how to evict people from his house. After picking up the eviction forms, defendant visited an unlicensed paralegal who owned a motor home and suggested that the defendant live in it, as defendant was afraid to live at his own house. Defendant paid this person $200 in rent and moved out of his house on February 10th because he was afraid of this Swearinger guy. Defendant admitted to periodically visiting the home after he moved out in order to feed his fish. Defendant stated that he did not take all of his property with him when he left. Defendant admitted that he was familiar with methamphetamine, but testified that he had been clean for 5 years. He denied cooking any meth at his house, stating that he does not even know how to do it. In addition, he denied owning the Coleman camp stove, whatever the fuck y'all are talking about. I don't even know what that is. I don't own it. I don't have it. The defendant admitted that the fire department visited his house 3 times after receiving complaints about an odor, but explained to them that the odor was caused by a jar of methylene that had broken open and spilled on a wooden crate. Regarding the receipts that were found in his wallet and car at the time of his arrest, the defendant explained that on the prior night, he had met with that Swearinger dude who insisted that he owed the defendant money and just began stuffing money into the defendant's wallet. The defendant noticed that there were some receipts in between the money. So on 3/11, think about this. The same time that there's this police chase about to happen, Swearinger, who I believe CI, it could potentially have been now a cop, because I'm going to get into that. This last name is now a cop in Modesto. And I can't find anywhere on this date. On 3/11 of 2003, you find me where this Evan or Shane Swearinger, whatever the fuck he goes by, this name, you would think that'd be a big write-up of a police chase led to somebody dying in a car wreck. You can't find it. Okay. And you guys, what I'm reading here is this is the write-up from the courts. Okay. Oh, Jennifer, hi. I would love for you to email me. I have some questions. I see your last name. I bet you have some good stories. Anyways, so here we are, right before this high-speed chase. He's like, here, I owe you a bunch of that money for that rent, whatever. And this gives him these receipts. And one of the receipts was from on 3/11, going and purchasing this stuff. And so that's where he's trying to explain, because he's over here with his defense attorney, like everybody, hey, dude, I didn't do any of this stuff. You don't understand. These people all moved in, and my house became a freaking, so think about this. With the stuff that Matt's finding, hey, there was this mobile van, okay, that he found way after the fact, right? And it looks like it's basically a meth mobile, right? Well, where Deanna Renfro was living, same name of the van, the family of the van, she's in a house that gets raided, okay? Which is, the house gets raided 1 week after Grogan and them find out that the watch was pawned again for a second time. And so they go and then they basically take the watch. But anyways, back to this wild shit here. So the defendant's over here saying, that's when I noticed these receipts. That's why those receipts are in there, is between the money. It's not, those aren't my receipts. Okay. Nicholas Romano testified that in February or March of 2003, defendant moved into a motorhome on Benson Street. Okay, this is going to get wild. You got to follow along. Benson Street. So where the defendant moved when he goes and pays $200 to this paralegal, asks for advice about evicting these people. He has to move out. He's like, dude, I got to get the fuck away. Like, this is crazy. He moves into this mobile home. It's on Benson Street in Modesto in the airport district. Howard Mitchell, an acquaintance of the defendant for the past 12 years, testified the defendant was living in Mitchell's parents' backyard in a mobile home in February or March of 2003. Mitchell stated the defendant had told him Swearinger had threatened to beat defendant up. Brett Santucci, who knows, who knew the defendant for approximately 1 year, testified that he saw the defendant living in the motorhome on Benson. Fast forward to 2025. We have no idea if it's the same Adam Tenbrick, but he just commits suicide in June of 2025. And it allegedly, supposedly, is at a house on Benson Street. And if it's the same Adam Tenbrick that was told something from his brother Sean, from all of that, I don't know. We're trying to track that down. Now, this is how the court, so I'm giving you guys just, this is the backstory. Now the court's deciding if on his appeal, because this guy went to prison. Okay, this Curtis dude goes to prison. Now, here's the background with he wanted to know the disclosure of the confidential informant. Because I said, I've always wondered this. Why was Renfro's place, which was actually Curtis's place, why was it raided? Well, the defendant argued that at trial, the court's denial of his request for the disclosure of the confidential informant's identity violated Evidence Code Section 1042, subsection D, and the state and federal constitutional rights to a fair trial. Background of this. On March 3rd, 2003, Officer Michael Hicks, now this is why Peterson wants it. On March 3rd, 2003, Officer Michael Hicks of the Modesto Police Department executed an affidavit stating that he had, quote unquote, reasonable cause to believe that there can now be found at 2921 Rim Rock Court evidence which will tend to establish violations of sections blank and blank of the California Health and Safety Code. Hicks explained that he had received information from a confidential, reliable informant known as X, okay, who had made controlled purchases of drugs for the Modesto Police Department and had given officers reliable information in the past. So you're going to sit here and tell me that the Modesto Police Department is doing controlled buys at Dina Renfro's motherfucking house? Dina Renfro, the same chick that went and pawned the fucking watch. The watch that I believe was pawned, not because Dina fucking had it ever. Dina was told to do it. Dina was given that watch to go do that. Now hang tight. Woo! According to Hicks, this X person, the confidential source, knew a person named Dina who lived at 2921 Rimrock Court. So the confidential source knew Dina, knew that she lived there. Okay. Hicks subsequently initiated an undercover drug operation in which X, undercover or confidential informant, entered the residence at 2921 Rimrock Court with money to buy suspected methamphetamine from Dina. After leaving the residence, X informed officers that he had purchased a substance later determined to be methamphetamine from Dina, using the money provided to X by the officers. Hicks also conducted surveillance on the residence, during which he noticed a large amount of vehicles and foot traffic coming and going to and from the residence, and stayed for a short amount of time before leaving. Based on the undercover operation conducted with X and on his personal observations, Hicks opined that methamphetamine was being sold from 2921 Rimrock Court and requested that a search warrant be issued for the residence. On March 12, 2003, search warrant on the residence located at 2921 Rimrock Court was executed. You guys, this is all going on while Laci and Connor have not been found yet. Okay. Prior to trial, defendant filed a motion seeking disclosure of the confidential informant's identity. At a hearing before Judge Girolami, whatever the fuck his name is, defense counsel argued that the defendant had not been living at the residence for the prior month and suggested that the CRI could corroborate defendant's version of the events. We need the name. We need the name because this person could actually testify that all this shit that's in here, okay, it's not his. He was not there. He was not doing the buys from him. Because my whole question is, how the fuck does Dina Renfro not get fucking caught up? How does she not get arrested? Dina Renfro is who you're buying from. How does Curtis? Because Dina Renfro's playing? She's playing along with the cops? And Curtis actually probably has information that he doesn't even realize that he has. Dina does not get in any trouble here. Dina doesn't get arrested. Nothing happens to Dina. So here, the defense is like, we need this person's name, okay? Because they can actually vouch for the fact that to corroborate the defendant's version of events. The people argued that the defense counsel's declaration based on information and belief was insufficient to warrant disclosure and contended that the CRI was not a material witness because he or she was not present during the search or when the search was executed. That was their argument? How did that even win? What does that have anything to do with anything? The court concluded that although an in-camera review may have been warranted, defendant's counsel had not laid the proper foundation for the disclosure because the search warrant was not attached to the moving papers, and defense counsel's declaration was insufficient. So basically, this dude Curtis gets screwed because his defense counsel is fucking shit, right? As a result, the court denied the motion without prejudice to allow the defense counsel to refile the motion with the proper documents. Do you think he did? No. The court encouraged defense counsel to refile the motion soon because the trial date was fast approaching. This dude went to trial on March 29th, 2004. Defendant's trial began. How did this man's trial begin on March 29th, 2004? So that means within a year, he was arrested in March of 2003. Boom. At the same time, we have to get this all handled before the Laci Peterson case. On the second day of trial, defendant's new counsel moved for disclosure of the identity of the CRI. Defense counsel argued that the people were trying to tie defendant to the premises and suggested that the CRI might exonerate defendant by testifying that the defendant was not a resident. He owned the property, but he moved out. And that these meth motherfuckers, they moved in and basically ran him out of there. So now let's go talk about some other shit. Now, how about this? Now this is what I couldn't believe. You have to then go back to the interview now with Deanna Renfro. Okay. And if you go and you pull up her here we go. Okay. This is select excerpts from the investigator Mark Sanders' interview of Deanna Renfro on March 6th, 2004. Literally 3 weeks before Curtis is about to take trial. But this is in Oklahoma. She left Cali and went to Oklahoma. So these investigators had to go to Oklahoma. Okay. Sanders says to Renfro, "Do you know who employed the detectives you visited with?" "Actually, I do not remember at all. I think one of them was for Laci Peterson and their family." "Okay, so you think it was a private detectives?" "Yeah, private detectives they were." Sanders says to Renfro, "And when did this visit occur?" "It occurred on, let's see, the end of February or beginning of March, because March 13th is when they raided the house that we were in. And like the night before, they chased my brother and my sister. My sister and my brother-in-law. And she ended up dying. She was in the hospital. And we all went to jail on March 13th. Out at that house that they came and seen us at." This is how she's talking. Sanders says, "Okay, so you gave this pawn slip to private detectives and you don't know if they redeemed it or not?" "Let me pause the tape. I've got 10 a.m. I'm pausing to allow you to answer the door." "Okay, I'm going to resume the tape. It's still 10:10. Miss Renfro, when I paused the tape, was there any discussion between us regarding this?" "Oh, no." "You went to the door?" "I went to the door and there was a little girl there looking for my 10-year-old daughter." "Okay, again, you tell me the second pawn. Pawn was February 14th. It was on Valentine's Day. That pawn you did not," Renfro says, "I did not redeem that. I gave that pawn slip to the private investigators that came to our house to discuss the watch." Ready for this? This is amazing. Renfro is they're trying to have this meeting. And Renfro's over here basically saying that Laci Peterson's family's private detectives went and talked to her. Not actual cops. Okay. Renfro says, yes, I did not redeem that. I gave that pawn slip to the private investigator that came to our house to discuss the watch. And like I said, after that, I told them that they could go ahead and, get it out, and gave them the pawn slip. But see, the thing of it is the pawn slip the second time, it wasn't in my name. It wasn't in my name. It was in our friend, Tony Scarlatta's name. And this is what's amazing if you actually are like myself. How did the cops or this private investigator know to go to Dina Renfro's? Because you heard Matt's book, they don't even get on the case until way after that in like May. But more importantly, nobody from that team even fucking knew who Dina Renfro was, could find her, even after the fact. But if the pawn slip that Homie had, that was the second one, Homie would have been giving up a name called Tony Scarlatta. Why are they going and talking to Dina Renfro? And why is Dina Renfro Dina almost gets it here when she says, yeah, but see, the thing of it is that pawn slip the second time, that was not even in my name. It was in our friend Tony Scarlatta's name. Renfro says, like I said the night before the raid on our house, they chased my sister and my brother-in-law in their car. Who did? Sanders says, what was their names? My sister's name was Danielle Harbin. Danielle Harbin. Renfro says, uh-huh. You guys type in Danielle Harbin and see if you can find an obituary on her. And then Sanders says, and your brother-in-law is? His name was Shane, Shane, Swearingen. Huh. He died on impact when they crashed, she said. Well, go and see if you can find Shane Swearingen impact police car chase in 2003 that this man died in. I can't. I would love to see it. Sanders says, so he crashed during the pursuit. During the pursuit, yes, she says. Sanders says, okay, go ahead. I'm sorry. Renfro says, okay. It's just hard to talk about. And then about like 8:30, they left at our house at 11:30 or 12, and they got the action about 1. She might say accident about 1 on the 13th, 1 in the morning. And about 8:30 on the 13th morning, they came in and raided our house, for they thought we had a manufacturing drug lab in there. Sanders says, okay, was there? No, there wasn't, she says. They did find some chemicals or whatever they wanted to try and make it, happen, but everybody went to jail. Me and my boyfriend, the other 2 couples that was living in the next in the room next to us, the owner of the house. See how she doesn't say that he was living there? And then my sister and her boyfriend were in the last room because he rented out his 4-bedroom house. He rented out his 4-bedroom house. You see how she says that? 3 rooms were rented to couples, which was me and my sister and her boyfriend and this other couple. That's the David Machado. We were only in jail. I was only in jail for like 3 days. And because they didn't find anything in none of our rooms, just like in the garage and in that back room or something. Dina Renfro in jail for 3 days. She's the one that was selling the motherfucking shit. She's the whole reason they set up this big old bus with this CI, who I think is David Machado. I think he's the CI. Okay. I think it's very ironic. Oh, can I move in here on this day? I think he was double loosey goosey all over. And then this, anyways, at the end of the day, whoever the CI is was sent there to buy drugs from Dina. How does Dina Renfro not do a goddamn day? She's like, I was just there for 3 days. Well, what did you give them? So then Sanders says, what were you booked on? Do you remember? Renfro says, it was on manufacturing. Sanders says, manufacturing? Renfro says, yeah, but they dropped because they, didn't find anything. There wasn't a... And then Sanders cuts her off and says, and again, the reason I asked this will allow the Modesto police to further narrow down this time frame. Renfro says, yeah, in fact, the owner is still in jail. Because remember, he's still in jail because the trial wasn't until March 29th of 2004. She's like, yeah, in fact, the owner is still in jail. Sanders says, in relation to your arrest, was the visit from the private detectives before that? She says, yeah. Sanders says, or after that? She says, before that. Sanders says, do you know how long? Renfro says, let's see. I pawned this thing on the 14th. And I think it was like the last, it was between, I'd say the 27th of February to my daughter's birthday is on the 7th. So it was between the 27th of February to the 3rd of March. I haven't been right on either end. What date were you arrested? We were arrested on March 13th. Sanders says, okay. Renfro says, it has been like a week or so to 10 days since I'd seen them before, we got the raid to came to our house and we went to jail. Now, on October 19th, 2004, this is from the James Breuer guy. Well, they write the name Broyer, but the other papers have his name as James Brower, Brower. So this would have been the guy that Deanna was dating. And now here's an excerpt of his interview. Hendy is there interviewing him, which is Modesto. And what happened to this watch? Breuer says, Deanna pawned it. And I guess the detectives at the time he was on this case, and they came to our house at the time of, it was on like Rimrock Road or something. Yeah, they came. It was Rimrock Court. They came to our house, and the first detective that came there, we gave the pawn ticket to him because if he had anything to do with this, we were like, here, go get it, here. And, we didn't have the money to get it out. It was $25. And so we told the detectives, here, if it has anything to do with this, go ahead and take the pawn ticket and go get it out and do your investigation. Then there was this other cop that came out here and talked to us, and he showed us a picture, and the picture that he showed us wasn't the watch at all. Hendy says, another cop came out here. Breuer says, a detective, I think it was Mark Sanders, I think was his name or something. Mark Sanders. Breuer says, I'm not exactly sure. Hendy says, did he say who he's from, like what agency? Breuer says, no, he didn't really. He was from the police department or from the detectives that are here in Lone in Oklahoma. And he did all the investigation, and he came up to the conclusion that it wasn't the same watch, and the people, it's not the same watch according to the picture that he showed us, and all this other things. And this guy says, Hendy says, not the same watch as what? As the one there, and the one in the picture that he showed us that was supposedly in relation to whatever. And he says, or is he trying to compare the watch that you sold with a picture of a watch that belonged to Laci or to her family across the street? Yes, correct, says Breuer. That's what I like to believe. He showed me a picture of the watch that was the watch, and then in that case, and it wasn't the same watch. Hendy says, where was Mark Sanders from? I think he was from Ardmore or here in Oklahoma. Hendy says, did he say who he was working for? Breuer says, no, he did not. Thought of it. He showed me a badge. He's some sort of detective. I don't know. He could have been from Oklahoma City. I'm not exactly sure, but I think he was from the these people are ridiculous. I think he was from the Ardmore Detective Agency. They've done this. And like when we were back in California and all that and all, we had like, two different groups of detectives plus a private investigator come up, and we gave them all this information. Hendy says, who was the private investigator? I haven't the slightest idea what his name was. I did have this card for a while, but when we moved, it all got lost. Hendy says, Mark Sanders, do you know if he was by chance a private investigator or was he a detective from a. I'm pretty sure he was a detective. He had a gun. Hendy says, okay, all right. And so it was this thing with Mark Sanders. He came out to Oklahoma or to where you lived about how long ago? To my house. This was a good 2.5 months ago. Dina Renfro fled to Oklahoma with this boy. Okay. And so no wonder why nobody could find Dina Renfro. They flew to it wasn't Scott Peterson that fled. It was Dina Renfro and her fucking peeps. They fled. Now, the digging that I was able to uncover here is you have this Curtis guy, right? You got the van, the brown van. You got this Curtis guy who has this house. He basically gets run out of his house, and his house gets taken over by literally meth heads, okay, with the brown van. Then after they get raided up out of there, then they're released 3 days later, according to Dina, right? Then what do they have to start doing? They start living in their van. But where are they living at? I have no idea. But they're able to, Matt Dalton's able to get a hold of this van that has 8 batteries in it, has the same last name as Dina Renfro, okay, the family. And they're nowhere to be found, okay? But what we're gonna leave ourselves off on is that this van would have absolutely nothing to do with the fact that on December 25th, the orange van was found lit on fire in the airport district on Thrasher, and that's where we're gonna pick up is to talk about that van, and that's the van that was found lit on fire the next morning, and that would get so pushed under the rug and not mentioned. And so we're going to be picking up on this lit on fire van. But who did Dina buy that van from? How come David Machado? Go look at my posts that I just made the past couple days. This same last name, same first name, David. He lived in Ceres, California. Ceres, California. He had a place in Turlock. The automobile shop was in where they mechanics fix cars and shit. That was where this van was supposedly bought. But the same guy that was living with Dina Renfro, that same name. I don't know if it's the same person because there's a bunch of them. But if you go to 2016, a cop was executed. A sheriff deputy. Wallace was shot twice in the head in a park, and David was the shooter. Go check out my community posts. And so you want to talk about somebody that could actually be, we're going to get into the whole Medina burglary and that it was an inside job, because what's been coming out is that the people that robbed that house knew that the owners were gone. That's what you call an inside job, when you know that they're gone. One of the people that robbed the house, he knew something that only the robber would know, which was that the house was under construction. Nobody knew that. It has never come out in all this time. And in these declarations that just got put out in 2023, 24, 25, these people came forward and they're like saying stuff that only the burglar would know, that the Medina's house was under construction because they were redoing the back area. It was not visible from the road. That a white sedan would be involved, that a van was involved. Pierce and the Stephen Todd guy, Glenn Pierce, did a bunch of digging into him. He never got in any trouble the rest of his life after that. He died at 60. He died in 2019. Stephen Todd, can't find a goddamn thing on him. But we'll be back for episode 8. Thank you guys so much. This case is anything that you think. And then here are some pictures I wanted to show you guys. They tried to show the jury these pictures of people that were back up. Okay, here we go. At trial. They're saying that this is who all these witnesses saw. This is a girl that was walking in the area. And then this lady. And then this lady with her dog. And this lady with her dog. And everybody's staying strong with like, yeah, none of these are the pictures that we saw. Like the people that we saw. The person that we saw was Laci Peterson, not this, not these. Unreal. They were trying to like say that these eyewitnesses, that's what they were showing the jury. Anyways, we'll be back at it. This case makes me sick. It makes me double sick. It's disgusting what has happened, and it needs this needs to go viral. And nobody talking about the Scott Peterson case with all of the stuff that's been released. I mean, we had our. I could just sit here and literally go through all these exhibits. If you guys want to see all of these exhibits that have come out and come forward, it's like we get a front row seat at what happened in the trial that we were never privy to because it wasn't on TV. It's all lies. It's all lies. Everything that we've ever been told about this case is a lie. And that makes that like, if that's not infuriating, I don't know what is. Laci Peterson, when I hear people say, why would an 8-month-old pregnant woman go up and, say something to the burglars? What does 8 months pregnant have anything to do with shit? I can't even believe that would come out of someone's mouth. She wasn't like on bed rest. She wasn't in a hospital, couldn't move. Okay. And she wasn't 8 months pregnant either. She was 7.5. She wasn't due until February 10th. It was December 23rd, 24th. And it's right across the street. And she sees, if you know how vocal Laci was, I mean, she literally, I'm going to put out on my next show the emails that Laci received back, because she was not only just vocalizing stuff in her community, she was going to like board meetings and shit like that. She wrote them 2 times in September and October of right before she was taken in December. Laci was causing some stir over there. She wanted the community to be nice. She didn't want the riffraff. Well, I would say, why are you moving next door to the riffraff? The cheap comes out expensive. I cannot, you want to be in a nice area, then move to a nice area. But you can't expect to move into we live in a nice house, but we're surrounded by the ghetto. But Laci was very vocal. And Laci would have no problem. Nobody would. If to walk out and take 10, 15, 20 steps to go to your front yard, because it's all close together, and say, hey, what are you doing? Get out of here. Before I call the cops. I know they're not home, blah, blah, blah. So, but yeah. But thank you guys so much. Appreciate you. We'll see you on the next one. Spread the word. Scott Peterson deserves a fair trial. And if he gets a fair trial, he is 100% factually innocent. There is no evidence against this man.